I think you just gave me our headline for it. Danny from Deep South says, "Coming apocalypse. Should we grab muskets for the Capitol?" You know, and that will not just just yeah.
Front porches used to be the place where grandparents passed on their knowledge to parents and parents to their children. It used to be a gathering point. Sunday after church, come sit a spell. Not so much lately. Not just because our culture has shifted away from that, but even in the past 2 years, in some places, it was illegal to spend time together. And yet during that time, wisdom could still be found on front porches. Our next guest has a live stream that they do called Porch Time, where they share their wisdom. And they have a lot of wisdom to share. Please welcome Danny from Deep South Homestead on episode 4 of our Flannel Forum.
Well, Flannel family, welcome back to our 4th installment of our Flannel Forum, as we like to call it. Today, we are very honored to have Danny from Deep South Homestead. I found Danny, actually, we have a small cabin in our back area that does not have septic. And I was Googling, how do you install your own septic? And he showed up. And subsequently, I watched a bunch of videos of theirs and have been very impressed by what they have going on their homestead. And I don't say this about many people, but if there's somebody I could be like when I grow up, I think you guys are doing it with the homestead, with your faith walk, with the knowledge that you guys have. It's really impressive. What I don't know, though, is how long you have been homesteading.
Well, Brian, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on your channel here. That always means a lot to me when people, contact us like this. It's not that we know everything, but we are honored to have this opportunity to be a blessing to other people. I've been homesteading now. It wasn't called homesteading when I first started. It's just, we have to get that understood, because homesteading is technically, if you want to really call it this, it's really just a fad. It's just a word that's been thrown out there. People want to mimic the actual homesteading ways, and we don't even come close to it, to be honest with you. If you actually went back and studied the history of it, we're not going to get 160 acres free from the government, and there's all kinds of things that we're just not going to have it. As a matter of fact, I think the Homesteading Act was done away with by, I think around 1980. Alaska was one of the last ones to have that right actually revoked from them. But I've been doing this for probably, I'm going to say close to around 42 years now.
That's incredible. We started with backyard chickens and gardens, but we just got our property back in the end of August of last year. So we're a few steps behind you in a couple different ways. What got you into I guess if we're going to be specific and not call it homesteading, then maybe a more self-sufficient type lifestyle. What was the draw for you?
Probably whenever I left home around the age of 18 years old, my family was extremely poor. I mean, we never had a whole lot growing up, and I always wanted better for myself than what my family had. My dad did the best he could with what he had, and I totally understand that. I mean, he even owned his own business, and my dad wasn't poor by no means, but he never knew how to use what he had to his full advantage, I guess you might say. And whenever I got old enough to get out on my own, my goal was to own my own place, debt-free, and to be able to live as free as possible and live off the land as much as I possibly could. Now, of course, there's been some things that got interjected into this along my journey that wasn't planned for, I guess you might say. But then again, that's life. That's how life works. So we never know how things are going to turn out. And it just, it basically just evolved over time. It's not one of those things that I can really say, I can put my finger on it and say, hey, you know, I mean, this is how it was going to be from the beginning, because that's one thing about homesteading is as you are the act of living self-sufficient is as you go along, there's one thing that's for sure, and that is that change is going to happen. And as it happens, you have to have the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding to adapt to that change. Because as you know, I mean, in our spiritual walk, the scripture says no man knows what a day will bring forth. And because of that, one day in your life can change everything. Wanda and I just did a podcast on that, talking about how one day can change your entire life forever.
That's very true. And sometimes for the better and sometimes for the harder, if that's a proper term. But yeah, sometimes it's a huge blessing, and sometimes it's, you know, trials, which can be counted blessings, but some are easier than others.
That's also where we find that, you know, we hear this old adage that some things only come around once in life. And there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of wisdom behind that, because that is exactly like what you just said. Everything's not always good and everything's not always bad, but sometimes certain things only come around once in life. And that's where the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding comes in, is knowing when to act, how fast to act, and how much to give into it, you know, to see what it'll entail on your future.
Well, that is very appropriate these days. Again, you know, we have seen, if you've been around long enough, you can watch the circle happen, you know, and it might be different circumstances slightly, you know, this go around, it might not be the housing market, but we've seen gas prices skyrocket before. We've seen wars and rumors of wars before. We've seen shelves wiped out before. And yeah, but knowing how far to go to prepare for what is happening is a hard conversation. My wife and I have been talking about that recently. Well, how much do you sock away right now? How much do you invest your resources into, you know, food preparation and off-grid living and stuff for potentially in 3 or 4 years, the ship might right. And then you put all that money into it that you could have been using to do, you know, something else. There's always something else we could spend our money on. And I think what draws a lot of us to this lifestyle is if you're prepared all the time, there isn't a swing. You know, it's just there. Your pantry's full of food. You know, you have the diesel or the propane, whatever your personal preference is. The ammunition in the closet, beans and bullets, I think is what Billy called it from Permapasture. So I think we're in one of those swings.
Yeah, it's a hard call this time, because this time is very different than times have been in the past. We're dealing now with more of a world of technology than we are with just what's the word, more of a realistic type world now. I mean, because now with technology, things can happen in a moment's notice, where it used to, you had communication just back and forth between people and stuff like this. Now we're in the age of AI and well, IoT with AI, the mixture of the two, combining of the two, 5G's on top of that. And you get all these other different, I mean, I could go way into this stuff, but when you get all this stuff involved, it's actually monitoring and doing everything for us in the age in which we're at now. And we're dealing with a total different level of wickedness than we've ever dealt with in human history at this point right now.
I agree. And it's, you know, soft totalitarianism, if everything is monitored and controlled by unseen, unfeeling machines that are acting as programmed. you know, it's who do you even, you can't grab a musket and march on the Capitol, because half the time they don't even know what is happening. Not that I'm advocating grabbing muskets and marching on the Capitol. I'm just saying it used to be very obvious who the enemy was.
Yeah.
Well, I'm, like I said, just starting our homestead, our literal homestead journey. We've been homesteaders at heart, I think, for probably almost 20 years now, but you know, we actually are putting our hands in the soil and our feet on the ground. What would maybe 5 recommendations for people who are like thinking about bugging out, or have just bought land, or have always wanted to, and now they think if they don't do it now, they're going to die? What would you tell people who are getting started?
Well, first off, having been one who's taught survival before, and knowing a little bit about what a person would need if they were in that position again, and you were just starting out, first thing is you've got to have water, and you need at least 2 sources of water. If you purchase a piece of property, you need at least 2 sources of water on it, whether it's a creek, a pond, an intermediate stream, a well, anything other than a municipal water supply. I mean, you need something that's natural and is a natural water supply, because without that, you will fail miserably. I mean, you can do it, but it's going to be a tough road to hoe. Secondly, is if I had already bought a piece of property and I was just trying to get started out, the first thing I'd want to do is get my infrastructure up. The problem I see today with so many young homesteaders starting out is they'll buy a piece of property, and the next thing you know, they're up there putting up all these little electric fences everywhere, and they're buying tons of animals, and they're trying to throw them all in one particular spot. And it's just a nightmare. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to the animals. It's not fair to your property, because you're I guess you'd say you're overgrazing everything. You're destroying your land, and you really don't even realize it. Thirdly, would probably, if I was talking to someone, which I did used to do counseling and stuff like this about this one particular subject, I would encourage them to try to be as debt-free as possible, because without debt comes a certain amount of freedom. Like the gas prices that we're looking at now, you know, they're saying they're going to go to $7 a gallon possibly. In some places, it's already that in the United States, and may go even higher. Someone who is debt-free and doesn't owe for their home or their land or anything to this nature, their cars or their vehicles, can absorb this a lot better than someone who is in debt up to their eyeballs, which is totally unscriptural to start with. Mm-hmm. And it gives you a certain amount of freedom in order to be able to survive this hit. Like you were mentioning a while ago, we've seen gas prices before soar. We've seen empty shelves before. We've seen all this stuff before, because I mean, even Solomon says in the scriptures, there's nothing new under the sun. So this is not something new. Now the level or the degree of it may be new, but it's not new to us. And if we're debt free, then we are able to absorb these blows a lot worse. And I guess the fourth thing I would probably tell someone, if you'd already purchased a homestead and you're trying to get started out, plant your fruit trees yesterday. You know, because the one thing is that most people tend to wait till they get everything done, and then they go out and put a fruit tree in, and it takes 3 to 5 years for a fruit tree to produce fruit. You know, you want to be planted your fruit trees yesterday, not today, not in the future, but yesterday, in order for them to be able to produce something for you. And I guess lastly would be to survey the property that you are looking at, or that maybe you have already purchased, and look at the best potential spot for gardening, because a water source and being able to grow your own food is going to be your ability to survive. Should I use the word LCE as life-changing event? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a collapse of the economy. It could be a storm, it could be a tornado, it could be a hurricane, it could be a health issue, it could be anything like this. You can have any type of life-changing event happen, and it would, if you have a great garden spot and you pull the pH on it and you know what the soil needs and stuff like this for a garden, you're more apt to be able to survive through any type of, let's just use the word coming apocalypse, if you want to use that word, you know, to be able to survive that. So that would be probably my top 5 things that off the top of my head that I would say would be the most important things.
I think you just gave me our headline for it. Danny from Deep South says, "Coming apocalypse. Should we grab muskets for the Capitol?" You know, and that will not just yeah. Number 4 actually made me feel better because we got out here and like I said, I think it was the end of August and the fruit trees were going on sale because they were what was left. And we went and I don't remember, spent a couple $100 on, you know, 5 or 8 fruit trees. I don't remember specifically. We bought some bushes too, and we planted them immediately. And mostly because they were on sale and I didn't want to wait a year until they were on sale again. But it's good to sometimes, you know, end up doing the right thing. Let's see. Well,
yes.
You've already kind of wrapped into some pitfalls that we should avoid. So what are your favorite sources for seeds and plants? Do you have a source you like better than others?
Well, technically I save most all my own seeds anyway. I don't really go out and buy a ton of seeds. The only thing that I purchase is something like I'll purchase carrot seeds because that's a biennial crop. It takes 2 years to be able to produce those seeds. And for me, at this point in my journey, it's just not worth that for me to have a place in a raised bed to just sit there for 2 years to grow carrot seeds when I can go online. And I purchased mine from a company called Kitazawa. And it's the only company that I purchased carrot seeds from. And I purchased the Rhode carrots there basically because I live in the South and the Rhode seeds, carrots, are native to Hawaii, which has a pretty similar climate to what I'm, you know, dealing with here as far as the heat and everything. And these carrots seem to do fantastic here. Now, when it comes to other type seeds that I'm willing to purchase, I normally would go with someone like Hoss Tool because they're in zone 8, just like I am. Even though they're from up northern Georgia, you want to always try to choose a seed company that's basically in your zone, because what happens is you have to allow seeds to adapt to your climate. If I go and buy Baker Creek seeds from up in Missouri up there, and I bring them down here to South Mississippi, they're not acclimated. Those seeds come from plants that's not acclimated to my climate. And that's one mistake I find that most people make. They jump online and they go to order seeds and they never look at the zone that they come from or anything to that nature. And they're buying seeds that are acclimated to different climates. They came from plants that were from different climates. And then they plant them and their heart gets broke because they didn't perform like they thought they would. And they're blaming it on the company, which it's not the company's fault. It's just a simple misunderstanding about acclimation when it comes to growing seeds. I can use an example. We grow English peas here, the little marble variety. When I first started out 20 years ago raising these English peas, they would get about 1.5 to 2 foot tall. That's about all they've done. Since I've kept my own seed over all these years, these things now get up 6 and 7 feet tall. And they've got to be put on a big, huge trellis, and them things make peas like you have never seen before. They're not the little dwarf little plants anymore because they've acclimated to my climate here. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to this type of situation here, is making sure if you're going to purchase seeds, get them from a zone that's very close to what you have, or either a little warmer. Don't ever go colder, just go warmer.
I'm glad you mentioned the carrots, because on our channel, we've jokingly started a carrot support group that we have all had terrible fortunes trying to grow carrots. So this might actually fix our carrot conundrum, if you will.
Well, if you go to my Etsy store, on my Etsy store, I have a book I've wrote. It's a carrot manual that teaches how to grow carrots and how to do it successfully in a very easy manner. We just put this book into print about 2 weeks ago, or I think it's 2 weeks ago. I finished it, got it into print. We have one for sweet potatoes, we have one for English peas, and now we have the one for carrots, and they're all on our Etsy store. And people all over the United States are buying these like crazy because they're having trouble growing carrots, because it seems like carrot is the one crop that everybody has problems with. And really, it's not hard to do.
You remind me of a friend of mine who's a master electrician, HVAC plumber. And when I call him with an electrical issue, he's like, it's not that big a deal. You just do. And he starts talking, and it just sounds like, witchcraft to what he's talking about. I can't see it. I don't know what's happening. And it's no problem. You flip that, do this, and boof, carrots. So it's good. I will go check that out, because that has been our Achilles heel. We've had almost everything else grow within reason that we should be able to grow, and them carrots, man, I tell you. Well, that segues perfectly into our must-read books, because you just gave me one I need to read. What books would you recommend for people who are jumping into this, or starting to grow, or survival, whatever? What would have to be in your library in print?
Must-read books for me, well, it's going to depend on, I've got a whole library. I mean, I literally have hundreds of books. So for me to pick a particular book would be totally difficult for me to do. It depends on the particular subject that you're looking into. Now, if you're wanting to learn how to butcher animals on your property, there's a book out there. It's called Basic Butchering. It's a very little thin paperback book that covers rabbits, chickens, sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, deer. It covers all of them. Gives you all your basic cuts in that for the homesteader who wants to do his own butchering. If you're gardening, there's for a beginner, I'm going to say now, there is a couple of books out there. Carla Emery has one called An Encyclopedia of Country Living, which is it's a big, thick book, but it covers a lot of detailed stuff. I'm real good friends with her daughter, and then we think a lot of them, Yeah. And there's there's a one called the Basic Bible for Gardening. We've shown that on our YouTube channel before. It's a really good book for beginners to learn how to do just the basics. And then, we've got the books that we wrote. We try to encourage people that are just beginning. I took every picture in our book that we wrote come from our homestead here. We did not pull anything off the internet to make these books. We did it all from our own homestead here to just show. We give pictures. Now I'm a picture person. I read more from pictures a lot of times than I do from actual words. So when we were putting these books together, I told Wanda, I said, you know what? I said, just make a short little sentence or paragraph and put a picture with it, because a picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes. Sometimes you can read something and it's not putting a picture in your head as to what is actually being said. But if there's a photograph to go with it, then you have something there that you can relate to. And that's how we put these books that we have together. And people have wrote back to us and emailed us and stuff like this and told us that, oh my word, this is the most comprehensive way to do anything I have ever found in my life. I mean, it's even like, David the Good, we have his book, about composting and stuff like that. And that is one of the, even though it's a thin, small book, it's very in-depth and it's very detailed. And I like that about his book also. And then we got Billy from Permapasture Farms. Billy's a very close friend of mine. Billy and I talk about stuff that we call classified stuff. We don't really talk about anybody else. And literally, Billy shows, his chicken tractors on steroids and stuff like that. He shows how that you can actually take this stuff and you can make your own fertilizer with this. And it's not that hard. Technically, it's not that hard. It's really not. And, we've got tons of other things we go on about there, but basically that's it. in a nutshell right there.
You can always have too little information, but it's hard to have too much, I think, in book form or in instructional form. If all the gaps are filled in, then, if you answer every possible conundrum or whatever that can come up, versus I've read some how-to books and it feels like you skipped like 8 steps, and maybe they were intuitive to the guy making it because he's been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years. But to the guy that's just starting out, I need to know how many times the wrench goes around before the nut comes off, that kind of thing. What about animals? What do you guys have when it comes to homesteading type animals?
Well, Brian, we've tried over the years, let me put it this way, I have tried just about every animal that there is out there, other than maybe a kangaroo or an elephant or a hippopotamus or something like that. I don't have any camels or anything like that, no giraffes, but I've raised cattle. I've raised all types of cattle. I have raised pigs. I've raised all breeds of pigs. I've raised goats, all breeds of goats, sheep, fowl of the air. I've had turkeys, chickens, ducks. I've had all this stuff. And at the end of the day, it comes down to what works for me on my homestead and my ability to survive whatever's coming. How is it going to affect me financially? How is it going to fit into my infrastructure? How much food is this going to produce for me based on how much time, effort, and finances I'm putting into this? Is it really worth it for me to go this route? And Wanda and I have come down, after having done all of these different things, we've drawn it down to just a few things. I used to raise my own pigs. I quit doing that because I realized that I can go to an individual that's not far from here, and I can actually buy me a couple of pigs a lot cheaper and not less a headache at a young weaning age, and raise them up to butcher myself a whole lot cheaper and a lot faster than I can if I try to raise them myself. So we do the pigs. We usually do 2 a year. Cattle, we tried all different breeds of cattle over the years, and I've come down to the Dexter cattle, because the Dexter cows, I'm going to be honest with you, Brian, I believe they could live off of sticks in the woods. The things, they just don't take a lot of effort to keep them butterball fat. They're not prone to all the parasites and that stuff. I don't worm my cows. My thing is, you don't ever put your animals out on pasture if the grass is wet, because the stomach worms live on the first 4 to 6 inches of the grass when it's wet. You wait till the grass is dry and you put them out there after the sun comes up, and they graze on the dry grass at that point, because the worms go back to the soil at that point. And, once you learn these traits, then your animals, and if you keep them nice and healthy with plenty of proteins and minerals and stuff that they need to stay healthy, good, clean, fresh water, the cattle just seem to thrive. The Dexters are easy birthing cows. We've had no problems with ours giving birth at this point. And then we do the chickens. Now, we do meat chickens once a year for about, 6 weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And that'll provide us with enough chicken to last us for an entire year. Usually 20 birds will do us for an entire year, believe it or not. And then we do, like right now, we've got the broad-breasted white turkeys right now. Now, these turkeys will get to be anywhere between 20 and 30 pounds a piece. We usually try to start out with 15, because usually when you start with 15, only about 6 to 10 of them is going to make it. So if you figure 20 to 30 pounds of meat for 6 to 13 turkeys, that's a lot of turkey meat to put in the freezer or to can. And that's enough to last for an entire year. That's about a 12 to 14 week period out of the year. And then it's over. You don't have to do it anymore. And then we have our laying chickens. We have Rhode Island Reds, and we have the ISA Browns. The Rhode Island Reds are a heritage breed. We keep a few of them around specifically just in case something happens. At least they will reproduce like they're supposed to. Mm-hmm. They're not a hybrid. The ISAs are a hybrid. but at the same time, they're the most prolific egg layers out there. They're very docile chickens. They're not vicious or anything like that. And usually we get a fantastic egg production. And then at the end of the year, or 2 years, at the end of 2 years, we send them to freezer camp. And whenever they go to freezer camp, then we either can them or, something to that nature. And then we put them in the freezer and we start all over again. But those are the animals: the chickens, the turkeys, the pigs, and the cows. We cut out the goats and the sheep. Even though I love sheep, sheep is my favorite meat to ever eat. If I do it, I will probably find a Katahdin ram that's just a young one, and I'll raise him up to have him butchered rather than try to breed my own. That's basically the only animals that we fool with anymore, other than maybe fish. If you want to classify fish in there, I just put 2 ponds in, and one of them I stocked with brim and catfish, which are up to about 3 and 4 pounds of catfish now. And the second pond is a bass and brim. I put the hybrid bass in there, and they're very large and very aggressive. So we have our fish to be able to eat along with the other animals.
How big are your ponds roughly?
One is about half an acre, and the other one's about an acre.
Okay, that's awesome. That's like on my dream list of things to do is have a pond on the property somewhere. But it's behind a hoop house and the dairy and all the other stuff that goes along with the dream list.
Oh yeah.
I appreciate the practicality of your setup with, especially with the animals, and the you have your heritage breeds in case everything goes real bad, but being on that type of footing all the time is difficult. So as long as you have them where you can create more than doing the cheaper, faster, bigger breeds that are bred for bigger, faster, cheaper, makes more sense, because it frees you up to do other things around the homestead. That's one of the things that we've had to learn, is as you add something to the homestead, typically it takes up a chunk of your day, even if it's not a big chunk.
Yes.
You go feed the pigs, you got to water the pigs, you take care of the chickens, then you have the meat birds, then you have the baby birds, then you have and it can just add up to where all you're doing is, I think somebody said, spinning plates, and you don't get to even take a minute and enjoy what you're doing because you're running around trying to keep all these systems going. So how much, I guess, do you rely, or would you need to rely to keep what you have going, on modern convenience like gas, electric, etc.? If the grid fell apart and gas disappeared, how long would it take you guys to either switch to no power mode, or would it even be much of a transition, or would it totally wipe out what you're doing?
It would be a small adjustment for us, but it would be a very small adjustment, because right now we've already built our life around living off grid at our cabin that we have on the back of the property. We go over periodically and we experience that lifestyle once a week. Sometimes we do it for a week or two at a time, just to keep ourselves adapted to it. We do it during the hottest part of the summers. We do it during the coldest part of the winter. We have added things to the cabin as we go over there and we live this lifestyle. We quickly realize what we need, what we don't need, what's missing, and we immediately try to correct that, fill in that gap with whatever we need to make it happen. I don't know that we would really, it would be a bad shock to us if something happened. If the grid was to go down while we're on the air, I probably would have some small inconveniences, but I've already purchased all hand tools that I would need to be able to garden with. Gas, I really don't have to have much of it to do anything with anymore. It's more of a convenience thing right now. Electricity is it's a convenience for us right now. I don't think that I don't think it would stop us, to be honest with you. I think we would be able to continue to keep going without any problems because we've adapted ourselves to this particular lifestyle. And at one point, Wanda and I went outside out here and threw the breaker on the house for a month. And we kept the deep freezers and the refrigerators going, you know, so that we wouldn't lose what was in them. But we lived for a month just to see what it would be like in the hottest part of the year. And actually, we came through it with flying colors. I mean, we realized our loopholes, places where we had failed at, and we, like I said a while ago, we corrected those places. Now, would it be an inconvenience living in the Deep South? Yes, because it gets hot. And it's very difficult to do things in the heat. Now that I'm in my 60s, when I was young, in my 20s and 30s and 40s, I call 40s to me was still young. I didn't know what it was to be tired. I mean, I could work 16, 18, 20 hours a day and never get tired. That's one thing whenever I used to, when I trained a lot and would do a lot of running, I could run 20 miles. I never got tired. My side never hurt. I could just keep going. And it was one of those things that, you know, it can be a pitfall if you're not careful, because you don't realize when you're actually tired. And as a result from that particular type of lifestyle, I now have what's called Hypertrophy Cardiomyopathy. I have an enlarged heart because I over pushed myself, if that's even a correct term, during my younger years and didn't realize that I was pushing myself that hard. I mean, this is what athletes have when they just drop dead on the field out there, is an enlarged heart like that. And my father used to look at me and he would always say, he said, boy, I don't know what you're made out of. He said, but you must be a machine or something. He said, because I've just never seen anybody that could just keep going as long as you do. And I thank God for it. Now, don't get me wrong. I thank God for giving me the stamina when I was young to be able to do everything that I was able to do. And now that I'm old, it's a little frustrating to me because my mind still tells me that I can do these things. And when I get out there, my body just says, no, we're not going to do this, you know, and it's hard. It's kind of hard for me to accept that sometimes, but that's the way life operates.
It as we like to say, it happens to the best of us. So I understand that mindset because I'll be 40 this year, and I'm starting to notice some things. But I feel like I have a kind of a 10 to 15 year window to get everything into place so that it's not a choice, right? Slowing down isn't a choice. You don't hit 60 and go, well, okay, I'll just take it easy now. Your body goes, like you said, nope, we're not doing that. Knock it off. So I know that's coming. So I'm trying to get stuff set up so that I can, when it happens, enjoy what is around instead of being frustrated with what I didn't finish. But that does have to be tempered with, my kids are only the age they are for today. I only have them for a little while longer before they are going to be released like arrows. So there's always that balance in your life between the desire to do and what we should be doing.
I agree.
So let's switch gears then over to YouTube, which I was talking with Billy with, is kind of funny bedfellows for, survivalists, preppers, food security people, right? Because most of us are out from the grid or away from it and have moved away from society at whatever time we chose to do it, and are not, super interested in sharing everything with everybody. And I'm certain there's not everything that you have shared with everybody, but you have currently, I believe it's 216,000 subscribers. You guys started your channel back in December of 2015, and you have, at last count, I think 35.2 or 35.3 million views. What got you guys into putting your life out there on YouTube?
Well, this might sound a little bit comical, but I I watched YouTube on and off, you know, before Wanda and I got married. I watched YouTube on and off, not a lot, but just sporadically. If I needed to find, if there's something that I just couldn't figure out how to fix, you know, I would grab YouTube, and that's what it was for me. It was just a means of being able to figure something out. And one day, in my journey to grow carrots, I was doing some research, and I ran across an individual that was showing raising carrots and stuff, and I was watching that person, and I looked at, they had this pretty bed out there, and those carrots were spaced, I mean, like perfectly spaced apart and all. That dirt was jet black, and the tops weren't standing up pretty and straight. They were just a little bit wilted over. And I told Wanda, I said, if that person pulls them carrots up out of that ground and there's not a hair root on them carrots nowhere, I said, them carrots was staged in that dirt to be spaced that perfectly apart. And they were bought from a store somewhere and just stuck in the ground, you know. And lo and behold, that person went to pulling them carrots up, and I looked, and I told her, I said, I knew it just as sure as God made apples green before they turned red, that person staged this. And I said, if they can do that and get the number of views that they're getting, if I can do the truth, surely I can come close to that. So we originally started YouTube to pay our internet bill, because the internet bill had gotten, it started off, I mean, I'll be transparent with some things here. The internet started off with us, it was around $30-something a month. That's what back at that period of time, that's what it was costing. And then all of a sudden it was $45 a month, and then it was $55 a month, and then it was $65 and $80, and it got up to like $90-something. And I told her, I said, what have we changed? And she said, I haven't changed anything. And I told her, I said, well, I'm calling company or something. Something's wrong here. So I called the company, and they go, well, they said, you know, taxes and surcharges and fees and stuff like this, you know, it's all these things like this. And I said, well, all right, you know, and I hung up, and I told Wanda, I said, well, look, it's like this. If we want the internet, because I have a different mentality than most people do. I've owned 3 companies, and all my companies were very successful because I've just got a different mentality. I was taught business by multimillionaire people that I knew how to do business, and anything that you own that does not make money needs to go. And I told her, I said, if we're going to have the internet, then it needs to be able to make money for us. So I said, the only way we're going to be able to do this is we're going to have to try to figure out this thing called YouTube, and we're going to have to figure out how to make it work so that it can pay for the internet bill. Because if I'm going to have it, it's got to pay for itself. And Brian, that is, in a nutshell, is why we started YouTube. We didn't start YouTube to be famous. We didn't start YouTube to be rich, which if anybody ever, I'm not going to go into that because I don't know if it's possible. But I mean, it's just one of them things that it was out of necessity. YouTube was created. And from that point, it became a mission for Wanda and I, because we were looking for a mission that we were at. And the churches didn't really have anything. All they were interested in doing was traveling to Nicaragua, the Honduras, or somewhere like this. And it became more of a vacation thing for churches with families than it was actually helping anybody, you know. And Wanda and I just talked about this, and I told her, I said, you know, I said, in business, I learned a couple of things over the years. One is you don't ever talk about religion. The other is you don't talk about politics. If you get into business and you start talking about religion and politics, you can lose your company in a heartbeat. And that's why I said, so when we get on YouTube, that's one thing we're not going to do. We're not going to talk about religion and politics up front. Well, as soon as we got started, within the first 6 months, everybody was talking about God, and everybody was talking about, you know, how the Lord blessed them and all this kind of stuff. And I told her, I said, you know what? I said, I got Porch Time going here. I said, I think I'm going to just kind of put a little feeler out there on Porch Time to see what kind of response I get by mentioning the Lord in it, and just see if this is an avenue that maybe he wants to take us down as a mission or a ministry. So I began to mention the Lord in Porch Time occasionally, And I began to see, not only from the views, the comments and stuff like this, the blessings that come along with it, I began to see the blessings in our life from being obedient to the Lord, because I was a minister for several years and had gotten out of the ministry because of the way the church was doing. And I was looking for a way to use that ministry again. And little did I know that YouTube, the one thing that we started to pay an internet bill with, would end up being a ministry for Wanda and I to be able to not only pay an internet bill, but to be able to be a blessing to God's people.
And the audience that you can reach, the numbers on YouTube compared to brick and mortar structures, you know, a regular church, if
Yes.
you had, you know, I know your views average somewhere around 20 to 50,000 per video. And even if half of those were, you know, somebody viewing it twice, that's still, you know, 10, 20,000 people that have heard, you know, from you being faithful, glorifying the Lord. A church would explode if 10,000 people showed up, you know, on a Sunday morning to hear the word. So it provides you with such an audience to be able to minister and to bless and to exhort and cajole and whatever else God lays on your heart that you just would not have otherwise.
Yeah, I have a sister that's a missionary in the Philippines, and I had talked to her at one point years ago, and I told her, I said, sis, I said, how many people have y'all reached this year? You know, and she said, well, we really are expanding rapidly. She said, we've reached probably 100 to 125 people this year, you know. And I told her, I said, you know, I said, y'all really, I said, that's a blessing. Don't get me wrong. It is a blessing under the conditions that they were in. I said, but y'all really should consider doing something with the technology that's out there today, like YouTube or something like this. I said, because that way you could reach more people. And she goes, oh, I don't know about that, you know. And I told her, I said, look, the bottom line is this. I said, this past month alone, I reached over 1 million people. And I said, I don't know out of the 1 million that I reached, how many of them, and I don't know what impact it had on their life, no more than you knew about the 125 or the 200 you reached. I said, but I believe in the end, God will hold us responsible for not using the technology that he's given us for his purposes, because let's just look at it like this. The devil's sure going to use it for his benefit. So why don't we use it for God's benefit?
That's right. That's right. Well, how do people find you? I mean, we have your YouTube channel, the Deep South Homestead. Are you on any other platforms that people can find you?
Well, we have a web page, you know, deepsouthhomestead, you know, .com, and then we have Patreon. We're on that particular platform. We have a couple of videos out there on some other platforms, but to be honest with you, I've done so much research into all these different platforms, and we do a podcast, you know, twice a week usually. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Apple. There's probably about 15 different platforms we're on there with the podcast that you can find us on. But as far as videos, we're mainly just on YouTube and Patreon. And then a lot of people try to get us to go and say, man, at first it was like, you need to go over to Parler. They kept telling us that. I said, look, Parler's going to go down. Y'all people just don't know that. Behind the scenes, there's things going on. And then they're like, well, Parler went down. Everybody from Parler went over to Rumble. They said, you need to go to Rumble. I'm like, guys, you don't even know who owns Rumble. I said, you know, Rumble is probably one of the most legalistic groups that's out there. They're the most, you know, liberalistic people. They're the same people on Rumble that own the movie studios out in, let's just say that, out in Los Angeles. The same people own it. And it's just, even though people from Parler went over there, and then they're like, well, go to BitChute, you know, because you got freedom of speech over there. And I told them, I said, look, guys, I got stuff behind the scenes I can tell you. I said, everything is being censored. It's kind of like if you've got cattle and you have them in corrals and you want to find out which cows are the ones that's giving you the most trouble. You start creating platforms, and you start saying you have more freedom of speech over here and you have more freedom of speech over there. and you keep herding certain groups of people over into these platforms until finally you get them all down to 1 or 2 or 3 different platforms, and then you know where your problem's at. Those are the ones that are the most conservative ones. Those are the ones that's going to be your problem if you're trying to set up a society like we are, that is basically communist, if you just want to be honest about it. You know, then they know who's who, and you're all over on a social media platform over there expressing your thoughts and your opinions, and then when they come to you and they go to arrest you or whatever, you're sitting there going, well, I don't believe in that, you know, and they go, well, look, here you are, you're on this platform, you've been expressing yourself now for this long, you know, you're lying to us, we can take you to court, we can prove that you're this, we can prove that you're that. And Brian, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of stuff going on behind the platforms that is going to be there to take people down rather than be a, you know, there's no such thing as freedom of speech now. Let me just say that. It's all been taken away. As a matter of fact, it was taken away several years ago under the, well, I'm not even going to tell you which administration because I don't even want to get in trouble about that. And I definitely don't want to get you in trouble. But it was taken away. It was, our freedom of speech was actually given over to the United Nations at a particular point in time. Most people just don't realize that.
Yeah, there's the idealistic world and the idealistic views that may have at some point been, at least if not true, then hoped for. We're way past that. So
oh yeah,
that's the hard part, and I think why we're seeing an uptick in people trying to do that terrible, dirty phrase, self-determination, I think it's called, horrible evilness.
Oh yeah, horrible evilness. Yeah.
If the more people that are dependent on their system, the fewer people can say no to that system, because if that's where your food comes from and your water and your electricity, and they threaten to shut it off by hook or by crook, by accident or on purpose, you will be beholden. Somebody in one of our live streams said that they think homesteading is one of the greatest forms of anarchy out there, and I thought that was great. And it's, to an extent, it's true. You just want to be left alone and be able, like you said, to live your life with as much freedom as possible, not to impose on anyone else or to be put upon yourself, just to enjoy your land the way you want to. If it's with, you know, like you said, cows, pigs, and sheep, or cows, pigs, and chickens, great. If you want llamas and elephants, that's your deal, but that's your right to do. And that's disappearing quickly, if it hasn't disappeared all the way already.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for spending the afternoon with us. I know you said you have some bad weather coming in. Ours is supposed to be here tomorrow. It's currently a beautiful day. I spent the morning moving my electric netting around that you warned against, and my chickens, so they didn't wreck my property. And we've moved our meat birds out into our chicken tractors, and we've just been at it full bore. So I appreciate, I know you're very, very busy, even if you make it look casual. So is there any maybe final thoughts you would have for anybody before we wrap this up?
Yeah, if you're going to, a couple of things. If you're going to do YouTube out there, and that's something that you really want to do, you know, do it for fun to start out with. Make it something that you want to do for fun. If you're trying to do it to get rich at it, you probably will fail, more than likely, unless you're very manipulative. Now, if you're a manipulative type person that loves to do clickbaits and all this kind of stuff, yeah, you can make something happen. It's just the marketing era that's involved in it. You can make that happen. You know, if you're out there trying to start a homestead and you're trying to start it now, you're probably late in the game, especially if you're just trying to buy property, because everything's fixing to go astronomically high. We're fixing to go into what's called hyperinflation. It's going to be extremely difficult to be able to purchase anything that you need for infrastructure. You know, if you've got the right piece of property, it's possible that you could go back to doing it the way our forefathers done. If you got the right kind of trees, if you had chestnut and black locust and, you know, these type of things that don't rot on your property, then you can make fence posts. And if you learn how to, you know, burn the ends of them like they did back in the old days and char them and drive them in the ground and things of this nature where the insects wouldn't destroy them, you could probably make it, but then you'd still If you were trying to put up wire, you just have to purchase wire. You'd have to go back to cutting the long, slender poles if you had enough property to make your wooden fences out of. I mean, it can be done, but you've got to realize if you hadn't bought the hand tools to do all these things with, it's still just not going to happen. And you don't want to go over on people as being negative or a doomsday type person out there, because the snowflake world that we live in today can't take that type of rhetoric. It's one of those things that their minds cannot comprehend that, because they haven't been raised to understand that if you haven't prepared to some point, you're probably not going to make it. And that's just, it's sad, but there's a fact of reality there. I mean, you mentioned you have meat birds and stuff like that you want to move around. And in your instance, the electric netting is one of the greatest things in the world, to be able to move them around to free range with the price of feed as high as it's going, and the fact that it's fixed to become non-existent is where that electric netting is going to come in handy, especially if you have a solar powered backup system for it. You'll be able to move them around and free range them, and you'll survive because you've learned how to do it. But somebody who has never done this type stuff and they're just starting out, it's going to be a little difficult for them, Brian. And I don't mean ever to be negative with people or a doomsday type person. I'm more of a realistic type person. And because I've taught survival and run 3 businesses, one that gets on to me lots of times, because I am straightforward a lot of times. I say things that might hurt some people's feelings, but the world that I came up in, they're just that. They're just feelings. They don't amount to a lot. You should take them and you should use them as a building block for your character and for your future. Don't ever think that you know it all, because at my age, at 60 something years old, I strive to learn every day of my life. When someone says that they have arrived or that they know everything that they need to know, they're about ready to fall, because they have just made their first giant mistake, because none of us know everything. And that's one thing we have to get in our heads. And this is probably going to be the greatest. I'm going to tell you, this is the greatest one tool I used to teach in survival. This one tool right here. The one reason most people fail and do not succeed is the mental side, because most people are not willing to let go of stuff that they've either heard or been told or whatever, and adapt. You go into a situation, you assess your situation that's around you, you adapt to it, and then you overcome it. And if you can do those things, then you will be successful at what you do. I mean, that would be the only advice I'd have for somebody out here today.
You said Wanda gets on you for being straightforward, and it brought to mind the verse in Proverbs that I think of a lot that says, better are the wounds of a friend than the kisses of an enemy. So I'd rather be told there's a cliff coming than, pat you on the back and say everything's fine. And guess what? If we're wrong and the cliff doesn't happen, thank God we have more time. But the cliff always comes. The timing might be wrong, but it always happens. Empires fall, man falls, systems fail. The Romans had in-ground heating in England, before they pulled back, and then they were back to wooden huts and straw for the next 1,000 years when they were making ceramics. So it's happened before, it'll happen again, and it's just a matter of timing. So, well, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. I've learned a whole bunch. I feel like I could sit with you on your porch and, come over and chat with you for probably a week straight before we start to circle around to the same topic again, but we'll have to make do with this. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
I definitely appreciate the opportunity, Brian, of being able to come on here. And, it's always my desire to be able to be a blessing to someone else, and at the same time to be able to honor and edify and glorify my Lord, and to just fellowship with fellow like-minded people such as yourself. That always lets me, it's an encouragement to me. It's kind of like when Elisha was in the cave and he says, Lord, just take me home. There's no more. I'm the only one left, you know, and he says, no, there's still 7,000 more down there and ain't bowed to me yet, you know.
That's right.
And that's kind of the way I feel. Sometimes I'm like, I'm all alone here, and there's nobody else around me that feels like I feel in my neighbors or anything like that, and I feel alone. But when I run across people like you or your brother or Billy or even Kevin and Sarah from, you know, Living Tradition. Kevin's a good friend of mine, him and Sarah. Different ones like this. You know, when I run across all these people like this, it gives me hope that there's others out there that the Lord is using just as mightily. And then that brings peace to my heart.
That is one of the things that I think I discovered. We talk a lot about community, not to restart the conversation, but finding the like-minded people around you, because no one can do it by themselves. You might have every system in place, but you're going to need something, even if it's moving something that takes two people, right? If Proverbs says, if, you know,
Yep.
two are better than one, because if he falls down, he can help him back up again. But YouTube, we have found people, you know, such as yourself, Billy, Sean, the Modern Yeoman, my brother, and not just people who are making the content, as it were, but the people who are the subscribers. You know, there are
Yes.
multiple hundreds of thousands of people who have the same, they might not be making the content, but they're out there watching going, that's right, amen, I'm with you. And that is a huge encouragement, like you said, to read the chats in your live streams of people going, yeah, 100%, right on, and you're not alone and you're not crazy. So, all right.
Yeah,
so
we have some who's, I actually got a guy coming to, I have a guy who's coming tomorrow. You know, we're going to be, you know, he's been here before, but, you know, we sit down and we share things, and he's not a YouTuber. He's just a subscriber. And that's one of the blessings of being a YouTuber, is being able to mingle with the rest of the society out there and be a blessing to them as much as them be a blessing to us.
All right, sir. Well, God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you for spending some time with us.
You are more than welcome, Brian.